Comedy 365.
And now programme 4 in this series called simply Things, presented by John Dredge. Programme 4, The Environment.
Hello. Welcome to the next in an ever-expanding and yet ever-decreasing cornucopia of programmes called Things. Last week, Mrs. Purpleoid wrote in claiming that the programme was slightly too big. So we've whittled it down using an audio whittling iron and hope it will fit more comfortably into your radio, Mrs. Purpleoid. Although one of your neighbours told us that you are in fact too small, and he believes you should stand on a ladder or extend your legs using the force in some way. But don't do it until your neighbour is out of range. Today we look at the environment. We'll be looking from left to right at a series of twigs and wondering why they seem slightly aloof when compared to branches or leaves. We'll be looking at your 100 favourite lawnmowers, and Dr. Wickham Gorblimey will be putting a twig into an electrical socket to see if nature and non-nature can combine to form an unusual occurrence. Protective goggles can be found in this week's edition of the Radio Times, priced twopence halfpenny farthing. We'll be experimenting with sticks, converting them into binary form, smashing them to pieces with a mallet, and then asking whose idea this was and how they got a job here. Also, Fen Fenders will be demonstrating his new invention, which allows hedges to look more impressive, but by the same token not in any way confrontational. Also, Dr. Newcomb Physics of the Forestry Commission will be building a tree with specially provided materials including bark, paper and sap. But first, and by far and away before anything else, and in many ways immediately, and in a very real sense straight away and by no means later on or tomorrow afternoon, i.e. now, it's time for the answers to the questions to last week's quiz. We were offering the prize of a forklift truck, but we are sorry to report that it has gone off. So instead, the prize is a tin of pie charts, fresh from Durham University's Scientifically Odd department. Thanks to Professor Robespierre, who we are sorry to hear has recently become incredibly loud, and is now incarcerated in an anti-noise chamber on the campus. Hope you get quieter soon, Professor. The answer to question 1 was, when submerged, a pack of oboes make a distorted sound. If continually hit with a stick, the oboes sound slightly chilling. Often the sound is filtered through a colander, resulting in confused onlookers who were advised to seek medical assistance. The answer to question 2 was linchpin Kugelschreiber, a particularly unusual name when you consider the amount of ludicrosity inherent in it. Paul B. Hodges got 4 7/8 of that question correct, with additional 3 points for his enclosed full-scale diagram and the inclusion of a hand-knitted scarf, which will be very useful to me during the winter months. Of course, anyone trying to bribe me like that is immediately disqualified and an insulting fax sent to their home address. The answer to question 3 was, because the orchestra left their normal shoes at home and the conductor had to lend his portable collection of moon boots to them. The results can be heard on the album Mozart in Moon Boots, sponsored by the National Footwear Association and Sock Brigade. Question 4 was not to be answered unless accompanied by an adult. This was a trick question and a trick answer, spotted by many trick listeners. The answer to question 5, piano tuners should not use motor horns, as this distracts passing cars and lorries and may lead to accidents or puzzlement. If a volcano erupts when a piano is being tuned, leave it well alone until after the lava has gone by. Question 6. The answer to this can only be provided by writing to the Eagle Protection League, who will reply to your inquiries if you are related to an eagle or similar form of wildlife like a kestrel or herring. Photographic evidence is required along with a packet of tea bags, as they have run out and are becoming thirsty. Finally, question 6. If you are instructed to play a piece of music capo a capo, turn your instrument upside down and try to get inside it. The successful musician can then play the piece capo a capo, which is Latin for capo a capo, and this can be translated using a translator module attachment. This week's winner is Bob Mueller, but the challenge isn't over yet, as we've sent his prizes to a random address. And just to make the challenge even more interesting, we've also sent his house to a different part of the country. Next week we'll see how he's getting on. Well, now the time's just coming up to speed, so let's have a look at this week's subject, which is the environment. The environment was first discovered in 1860 by William Guarin when he looked outside and discovered it in the garden. He wrote a description of what he saw and sent it to the dictionary, and its later inclusion led to widespread public interest and helped to make the environment what it is today. Trees first came to public prominence when Amy Ringpool took a photo of one and sent it to the newspapers. This resulted in trees becoming famous all over the world. Hedges and flowers were also quick to get in on the act and were assimilated into the environment with what some commentators have called indecent haste, but now they are seen as very much part of the whole shebang. Twigs and moss were first found in a tin in Peterborough and were distributed by a network of environmentalists by fax until they could be found in remote places such as Scarborough and Newhaven. The environment slowly developed by osmosis and word of mouth, and now its place in the world is very much something that cannot be denied. Its future seems assured, despite contractual problems regarding the copyright of the hawthorn bush, which runs out in 5 years' time and may be replaced by bracken or even compost. Here are some random facts that you may not know, or indeed may know not, about the environment. In 1965, plants were found to be fake and were banned by the False Foundation, who were later themselves found to be fake. The Latin name for a cucumber plant is Quentin, and has been the subject of many a discussion amongst cucumber protection groups all over the country. In 1965, the environment was banned after the government became alarmed at the amount of unlicensed twigs available to the general public. After the ban, the environment was roped off, and people were required to cover their eyes when going outside, leading to major accidents all over the place. The ban was only lifted when the government realised its own stupidity, and as a result, many politicians were pelted with unusual objects. The first man to climb a tree was unable to get back down, and he remains up there to this day, existing on a diet of leaves and twigs. Round our way, small hedges are used as cricket bats in the annual hedge cricket tournament. The hedges are not particularly useful in deflecting cricket balls, and the local hospital always supplies a team of hedge specialists and other oddly fictional staff to help out with the inevitably fatal injuries. Shrubs were once seen marching down the high street by Mrs. Mabel Syrup of Winchester, who was later found to have problems. Now it's quiz time, and the first prize this week is a sledgehammer from the collection of Elsie Wicklow, who steals equipment off the workmen in her road. Don't forget that entries written on bric-a-brac will be disqualified and separated. The brick will be sent to Woolwich and the brack divided amongst the poor. Question 1. If you had a tree, would you place it in A. a knapsack, B. a watertight container, or C. a bit of ground? Question 2. A man has 3 lawns and 1 garden shed. If the 2 were combined under laboratory conditions, would there be a discernible result, and would the shed door come open? Question 3. The humble mole now employs a hibernation-atron machine, which allows it to hibernate at 3 times the normal speed. True, false, or wrong? Question 4. When placed in the environment, Wellington boots turn green and emit a strange crackling noise. When taken out of the environment, they become puce. Is this the correct answer? And what stance would a boot historian take on the matter? Question 5. When chickens are placed in the environment, how do they react? And who is their line manager? And finally, and in a very real sense, question 6. If a pond was installed in the middle of an office, would it confuse fellow workers, or would it just be viewed as an interesting aquatic addition to the meagre and futile workplace? And how would the boss view it in terms of marine education? Also, conversely, if a standard office desk was placed in a park, would the parkie become infuriated, or merely accept it as part of the ever-changing world of today? When you think you have 2 of the answers, write them down and send them to us. Remember, anyone getting more than 2 answers correct will be disqualified, hoisted to the top of a long pole, and forced to sell insurance for 3 days. Don't forget, our address can be found where we are based, and in the same place that we have been in for some time, despite the danger of our pipes freezing. Now here's a letter on environmentalist issues from a listener, Herman Quoggs, who writes, "Dear Things, a factory has just opened up near my local park, and it is harming the environment. Several factory workers have been seen hitting shrubs with mallets, kicking leaves around, putting saplings in a blender, and generally causing unpleasantness and awful harm. Is there anything that can be done? Well, Mr. Quoggs, if you write to the National Association for the Stopping of Harmful Things Happening to Nature, they should send a strongly worded note to the factory, and also may be able to stop the supply of air getting to that part of the country, which will reduce the amount of factory workers considerably. If all else fails, try to pour silage into the factory through the windows, which will certainly annoy the workers, with the possibility that many of them may hand in their notices and join a factory somewhere else, maybe in Shropshire or the land of Nod." Here's another letter from a listener, this time from Gladys Gloyproduct, who writes, "Dear Things, is it true that the environment is receding? And if so, what is the best and worst thing to do in this situation as of now?" Well, Mrs. Gloyproduct, the environment is not receding so much as shrinking due to a general decrease in size brought on by a reversal of growth. In 3 years, experts believe trees will be very small indeed, while plants, herbs and cactuses will have to be viewed through a microscope. We advise you to invest in one of these or a really strong pair of glasses. You may like to join the Inflate the Natural World Foundation, who can be found a long way away. They charge a subscription fee of pounds, shillings and pence, and their website can be located inside a small wickerwork basket near Leeds Town Centre. Call their phone number now for more details, or don't call if you require less details. Finally, on listeners' letters, Herbert Chogula writes, "Dear Things, when I go down the lane to the park, there is a very loud and offensive chaffinch that screams its personal problems in my ear. The chaffinch also annoys all the woodland creatures with its incredibly loud voice and pathetic lack of self-awareness. It also spends long periods on its mobile phone, talking in a very boastful voice. It is a tedious chaffinch and needs to be told to put a sock in it, yet I don't want to hurt its feelings. However, if it continues to blather on in such an irritating fashion, I might throw something at it, and I don't mean maybe. What do you suggest?" Well, Herbert, my advice is simply to flick an elastic band at it. If this fails, get all your friends and neighbours to throw things at it, and make jeering noises until it vacates the premises under duress. Now it's time for Inventor's Corner. In 1815, Bob Lurgons attached a tree to a small block of concrete and found he had invented the tree concrete attachment device. This was used in many places, mainly to attach trees to blocks of concrete, but also to attach blocks of concrete to trees. Bob claimed it was his own idea, but his wife Muriel, a really irritating woman always talking on her mobile phone in polite company, claimed it was her idea, and was later put down. Bob developed this invention in 1879, when he put the device on wheels and pulled it round the garden. Thus was born the tree concrete attachment trolley, which has been used by tree and concrete specialists for 30 years. As one of them said, "Before this invention, I was unable to pull trees attached to blocks of concrete around the garden. Now I can. Bob made literally some money from his incredible invention and is still going strong, recently unveiling his new device, the Tree Concrete Attachment Trolley and Sidecar, which allows passengers to travel alongside the tree and block of concrete. Bob will be embarking on a series of lectures tomorrow, and spectators are advised to attend if they want to, and not if they would prefer to stay at home. Last time, one man complained about Bob's lecture series, at which point Bob pushed him down one of the longest tubes in the world, and apparently the man has still not come out the other end. If anyone has any information on this, we'd be surprised. Don't forget, there is an embargo on Bob, which will be lifted when he sees fit. Well, that's the end of today's programme. Don't forget there's our special fact sheet available entitled How to Build Silage, as well as a small plastic replica of myself up a tree. This is the first in a series of action figures to tie in with the series. Others will include a replica of me in a hedge, a replica of me near a plant, and a replica of the replica I mentioned earlier in case you lose the original. There's also a book about the replicas available, and a companion volume about the book about the replicas, price $5.99. If you enclose 10 shillings, we'll also send you a large mallet to strike people who talk loudly in libraries, and a Bunsen burner for all your daily fatal experiments. Also available is our special mug, which can be used for drinking things out of and for hitting people with. But remember, it's your world, so why not make it a happier place today by strangling less people? Goodbye, good luck, and good riddance. Cheerio.
That was Programme 4 of Things, written and presented by John Dredge, who can be reached at johndredge@hotmail.com.